Simmons.
Hello.
Hi everyone. How y'all doing?
So I think we'll just post up right here, brother.
Nervous. I'm nervous.
You're getting used to it now, though, aren't you?
A little bit.
It's hard to get used to it, isn't it, though?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, just come in. You can come in.
Just the Tulsa press.
This is all Tulsa Press, yep. How's the hair look?
Looks great.
Okay.
Very chill.
Good like a Lord.
Be you. I can do the DeMarco pose.
All right, you guys, I'll just let us know. Pepper us questions. We can do some opening statements, however you'd like to handle things.
Go for it. That's our opening statement.
So this is Glynn Simmons. He was just exonerated 2 days ago by Judge Amy Palumbo. Oklahoma County District Judge Amy Palumbo signed an order dismissing his case with prejudice. It was a murder case that was filed in 1975 for a December 30th, 1974 murder. Let's go ahead. There you go. Yeah. I'll start over on that. So Judge Amy Palumbo, district judge in Oklahoma County, dismissed his case 2 days ago. He was originally charged in February or March 1975 for a December 30th, 1974 robbery, murder at a liquor store in Edmond, Oklahoma. He was tried in June of 1975. He was convicted. He was sentenced to death. At that time, the Oklahoma death penalty, the mandatory sentence for anyone convicted of death in 1975 in Oklahoma was death penalty. Convicted of murder, the only sentence was a death sentence. That was a statute that had been on the books in Oklahoma for not very long. It was a reaction that the Oklahoma legislature back then made to the well-known U.S. Supreme Court case of Furman v. Georgia. In that case, the U.S. Supreme Court stayed the death penalty nationwide because it was being administered arbitrarily and capriciously. In response to that, Oklahoma passed a law that anyone convicted of murder was sentenced to death. Not long after Glynn was convicted in 1975, the U.S. Supreme Court also found that Oklahoma statute unconstitutional, which really saved Glynn's life. And allowed him to stay alive so that we could get to this day so that we were able to prove his innocence and exonerate him. With him being exonerated a couple days ago, it makes him the longest serving wrongful conviction in U.S. history. I started representing Glynn in about 4 years ago. These cases take an enormous amount of work. You essentially have to prove someone innocent. Going through this, and so that's a little of the background on Glynn's case. And Glynn, why don't you say a few words?
Well, I want to say that I'm extremely happy and pleased that my my appeal winners is dead and I was totally exonerated. But nobody still haven't said that I'm actually innocent. I want to say this now, that I am actually innocent of the crime. I wasn't just exonerated. It is a difference. There's a distinction between the two. And I just want to make it clear to the public that I was actually innocent. Because the court wouldn't say it, nobody wouldn't say it, so I want to say it right here, right now. That I did 48 years for a crime I didn't commit, and I was exonerated, but I am actually innocent.
And we do intend at some point, some point soon, asking a court to make that finding. Now, that's not a finding that's needed for Glynn to be exonerated, but it's purely a finding we're going to move forward for compensation purposes under Oklahoma tort law. Glynn, if he's found actually innocent, and we can either get a successful jury verdict on that, or hopefully maybe the state would come to some agreement, it'd be a max of $175,000. That comes down to about $2,000 for every year he did, which obviously is grossly inadequate. But our next step is we'll be asking the court to find him actually innocent, so that he could start the process for that. It's not that something that would immediately occur. It's just a gateway so that we can start the process of litigating that. But to Glenn's point of exoneration and actual innocence, he is exonerated. The University of Michigan is kind of the authority. They have a registry of exonerees. Per the University of Michigan's definition of exoneration is a conviction to be vacated, which happened in Glenn's case, and the case is dismissed, which just happened 2 days ago in Glenn's case. And so per the University of Michigan's registry, who has all exonerees ever in the history of our country listed, and per their definition, he is exonerated, and per their list, he's going to be the longest serving ever.
In U.S. history, not just in Oklahoma, but in the whole history of the United States legislation.
Yes.
That's very significant also.
Yeah. And so Glynn, having just got out, he is 70 years old. He, as we've said several times, did 48 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. He had the prime of his earning life taken from him. He also has some medical issues he's dealing with now that would prevent him from, even a 70-year-old that hadn't had an opportunity to acquire skills and work experience. He's also, on top of that, has some medical issues that are preventing him from even really having a part-time job at this point, because of regular medical appointments and so forth. And so one thing we would like to get out to people is that Glynn has a GoFundMe set up. He is going to need some assistance. Any compensation is uncertain, and it's in the future. For Glynn to be able to survive, pay his rent, food, clothing, so forth, he's going to need to rely on the generosity of other people at this point. And so we would just ask that if anyone finds it in their heart to be able to contribute, Glynn's GoFundMe is very easy to find. Glynn Simmons, Glynn, Glynn is how you spell Glynn. Glynn, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Any questions?
Yeah, the obvious one in the room. How'd you do it? 40 years? I mean, that would break most people.
It'll take a long time. It was a long time, so it'll take a long time to tell you how I did it. I did it, a lot of struggle and a lot of pain, but I did it. I never did stop working. I was innocent, and you know, being innocent, you feel with a whole nother kind of drive. You know, because of that, you know, I kept the faith and kept fighting. Yeah.
Take us back to when you first got arrested. I mean, that must have been, a shock. I mean, if you weren't there at the scene, how did you get picked up by law enforcement to start this unfortunate journey?
I was picked up on a whole different case. And when it was found out I did do the case, I was actually participating in the lineup. I was 20, just turned 21 years old. Didn't know nothing about the law, the legal aspect. I had a right to an attorney. You know, I have no previous experience with law enforcement. No prior convictions, juvenile or adult. You know, I was just in the wrong place. You know, the wrong person in the wrong place at that time, and they needed a young black guy to. You know, you got to know the atmosphere of 1975 and what was really happening. And it was a case that they couldn't solve, and I was their pick. You know, didn't know nothing about the law, didn't know, had a right to an attorney, had a right to not participate in the lineup. And they said they picked me out of the lineup, which almost 20 years later, come to find out they didn't pick me out of the lineup. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are a couple people that we believe did it, and in our case to prove Glynn's innocence, one of the things we did is prove up a case against the people we believe did it. And it was a couple brothers that were in Oklahoma City at the time. Glynn was around them once at a party, and the police ended up going around finding everyone at that party, made basically a mass arrest. Where they arrest 8, 9 people, something like that. And Glynn was one of them. And the people that we believe did it, and we have significant evidence that they did do it, they were already in jail at the time Glynn was arrested on another murder that they ended up being convicted of. And so Glynn was allegedly picked out. The only evidence at trial against Glynn was the identification of an eyewitness who was a young lady. She was 18 years old at the time and walked into the liquor store, walks in, sees the clerk and 2 African-American males standing there, briefly nods at them, walks by, and as she walks past them, she is shot in the back of the head. She goes down, rushed to the hospital eventually, had surgery, the bullet was removed. About a week and a half after she was shot, she was released from the hospital and thankfully survived. Well, about a month and a half after the incident, after the robbery murder, she had a lineup put in front of her, and it was the most recent of about 7 or 8 lineups that she did. And she'd already picked some people out, and it turned out it wasn't them. And she testifies at the trial back then, at the preliminary hearing, that she picked Glynn out of a lineup. And she testified that at trial. And that's what the jury relied on to convict Glynn, is that this poor woman said she picked Glynn out at a lineup previously. Well, about 20 years later, Glynn was able to come across a little money from a young lady that he was married to at the time, passed away, and she left him some life insurance money. And he took that life insurance money and retained a private investigator who was able to get the city of Edmond and the city attorney at Edmond to turn over the police reports. It turns out there were several police reports in that file that the private investigator got for Glynn that were not turned over to Glynn at the time. One of those reports, and the most significant report that ended up being the basis for the conviction being vacated, showed that Glynn was not who this young lady picked out in the lineup. Who she actually picked out in the lineup was one of the 2 people we believe did it. And Glynn, she told us who did it. She told the police who did it back then. Unfortunately, somehow she ends up in court saying it was Glynn that she picked out in the lineup, when it wasn't. And so this report came to light 20 years later. Glynn hired an attorney, and unfortunately that did not work. It didn't work out. Frankly, the attorney didn't do as good of a job as he should have. And it ended up sitting there for a while. Glynn went about doing several things to try and get out, but nothing was successful. Back in 2019, early 2020, Glynn got my name because he heard about me handling another similar case to his, an innocence case, and he asked me to help him out. I took a look at Glynn's case and immediately saw that there was significant issues with the case. Frankly, it was pretty clear to me early that Glynn was innocent, and I agreed to help Glynn out. After a lot of work and many years of Glynn holding on to hope, we were able to get to today.
Plans to seek a civil rights lawsuit?
Highly likely. I mean, the report I spoke about that was withheld was highly exculpatory evidence. It's called Brady. It's the famous U.S. Supreme Court case of Brady v. Maryland. And and per Brady, the prosecutors are constitutionally compelled to turn over exculpatory evidence. Well, this was not. This was not turned over because, frankly, if the defense attorneys that the defense attorney that Glynn had back then had it, I don't see that the state could have proceeded. And the attorney Glynn had back then was, Glynn has, unfortunately, I like to think up until now, did not have very good luck with the representation he had. And his attorney back then should have seen that there was a lot that he was not given. But regardless, this report ended up coming out. And so withholding that report is a constitutional violation. That's a 14th Amendment violation. And that is a potential basis for civil liability for whatever government entity may be found liable for withholding that exculpatory evidence.
Are the men that you believe committed the crime, are they still in prison?
No, that is an interesting story in and of itself. Right around the time Glynn was convicted, wrongly convicted of this, the men we believe did it, one of them, their brothers, he was tried for murder and he was convicted. He confessed to it. He did it. And frankly, he was running around doing lots of robberies at the time, this guy. And he appealed, and the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals vacated his murder conviction, reduced it down to a manslaughter, reduced his sentence from life to 15 years, and he's now out. And he's still around the Oklahoma City area.
Both are out.
Both are out. One was never even prosecuted. The other one was released based on that Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals decision. And, yeah.
Mr. Simmons has a birthday coming up.
Yeah.
Any plans yet?
Not yet. I haven't planned nothing for the birthday. I'm living day by day. Can't make too many plans right now.
Glynn, if you could speak to this woman who wrongfully pointed you out in the lineup, what did you say to her?
I would,
victim too.
excuse me. I would let her know that she's a victim also. And if she would listen, I would show her how she became a victim of the same crime that I've done 48 years for. I recently spoke to the sister of the woman that got killed a couple of days ago. And me and her have been friends for a while now. And she's been one of my greatest supporters trying to make it out on parole. Her name is Miss Janice Smith. And she's been supporting me all the way through because she knew. Matter of fact, she sent a video deposition to the parole board explaining that Mr. Simmons and my sister is victims of the same crime. And letting them know that somebody got away with murder. That's, if I had a chance to talk to her, that's what I would let her know. I doubt she would listen though.
How does it feel to be standing here right now?
Normal right now. Feel normal. I've done it, so many times.
Can you describe just the feeling of what it was like walking out of prison back into it?
It was exhilarating, but I had envisioned it, I had dreamed it, I had prayed for it. It was 10 times more greater than I was, but I've been able to make the proper adjustments because, I knew this was coming. I had faith and belief that one day I would be standing there, like I said, I visualized it, I had dreams about it. And then when it finally happened, stepped into it and enjoyed it.
In those years that you were, wrongfully locked up, how did your personal life go? I mean, did you lose relatives, friends, family members along the way? I mean, you couldn't go visit or hold their hands when they're sick. I mean, what was that?
48 years, 5 months, and 18 days. You know, a lot of people died. A lot of people was born. You know, a lot of things happened. The world changed. You know, when I come into prison, it wasn't cell phones. You know, microwaves had just come out. You know, this is a whole nother. We talking about half a century ago. So when you ask me to describe it, even if I do describe it, most of y'all wasn't even born. So, yeah, it would be like just telling the story. You know. Then I don't like to talk about the bad part. I want to talk about these days ahead. You know, looking back, it's nothing but shade. You know, it's bright in the future.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're looking forward to in the days ahead?
I'm looking forward to living a healthy and prosperous life. A happy and prosperous life. You know, I'm a free man now. I go where I want, and I'm free to say what I want and do what I want. You know, I'm free in every sense of the word. You know, and that's what I'm standing on.
And I'd like to just follow up with the question about any potential compensation. I would just emphasize again that it is uncertain. It's something that's a long way off. And in between now and then, Glynn's going to need some help. And I really would ask if you guys put it out there for his GoFundMe, Glynn Simmons GoFundMe. He's going to need some help to get through these times.
Yeah, my immediate needs is food, clothes, and shelter. I've been in for 48 years, and they dumped me out with nothing, absolutely nothing. You know, so I rely on support from friends and family at the present. But any donations that can come my way, I would sure appreciate it. You know, I thank everybody who has already donated.
Any groups, any politicians, any documentarians? Is there any bigger thing that's going to be going from this point on?
Nothing yet, but we're keeping our options open, and yeah.
Okay, to hear that, you know, the record was broken for the longest, have you heard from any Governor Stitt, anybody like that, anybody in leadership?
Not at all.
No one.
I've been part of 8 or 9 in this state, and I haven't heard from anybody yet.
Mm-hmm.
Not from anybody. Lots of fighting, lots of resistance.
Yeah, I'll say this. I have handled a few wrongful convictions like this besides Glynn's. My experience is government, whoever it may be, law enforcement, prosecutor, judges, governors, pardon and parole boards, legislators. A wrongful conviction is a reflection that the system they run made a big mistake. And it's hard for our government leaders to accept that. It really is. In Glynn's case, luckily we had a judge and a prosecutor that were a little more open, but we had to spend 4 years putting together a case to get them to that point. I mean, we had to put a stack of innocence, documents, testimony, sworn testimony in front of them that was overwhelming to get them to where we are today. And so it's hard for government leaders to accept and admit that the system that they run made such a grave error.
And let me say something to add to that. Notice was given 25 years ago. About my actual innocence, notice was given when I hired the private investigator, as he was telling you, and he got all the police reports and all the documents that I was innocent. Not only that, but the prosecuting attorney in my case wrote a letter to the parole board telling them that I was innocent. And there was a lot of, support way before this, pointing towards. So they was given notice, like he said, they didn't want to admit when he made a mistake. And as I said originally, nobody still haven't said he is actually innocent.
I'll say it. He's innocent.
He's innocent.
That's right. So
We've got a problem in Oklahoma County and in Tulsa County.
Yeah.
Big problem. And we're standing in Tulsa County, where Joe and I have been successful a couple of times. And Glynn's from Oklahoma County, standing in our office. I mean, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
Real problem.
And Glenn's actually from New Orleans.
And even worse.
Glynn was born and raised in Harvey, Louisiana. That's where he was when this robbery murder occurred on December 30th, 1974. We've got a dozen witnesses saying, I saw him there. And it's really beyond dispute that he was there at this point. It's just so overwhelming. It's not contested that he was born and raised in Louisiana. He moved to Oklahoma City about 2 weeks after this robbery murder occurred. And he was arrested a month after moving here. And so he lived in Oklahoma for 1 month, out free, up until a couple months ago. He spent the other 48 plus years in Oklahoma in prison. And so he's from Louisiana. That's where he was. That's a large part of the proof that we brought forward to show that Glynn's innocent, is that he was in a different state when this happened.
Both Mr. Simmons and Mr. Roberts had allies, I think, at the time.
Correct.
How
Right.
did this case get to trial?
The one eyewitness. So
Prosecution tell him how it got to trial.
Go ahead.
It got to trial because they hid the evidence that showed them that it was never supposed to get to trial. They took all the evidence that let them know that I was not the man, and they hid it. That's how I got to trial, because all the evidence showing that I was innocent was suppressed.
Hence that report that the private investigator found years later.
Had those reports been revealed, no doubt the verdict would have been different. No doubt I probably would have never even been, indicted from the beginning, had those reports not been suppressed. So it was deliberate. There wasn't just no miscarriage of justice or mistake. And it was a deliberate act, And he was saying 48 years later.
Sounded fantastic.
Any more questions?
Can we just go from left to right, first name, last name, and official title, and you get all signs and all that good stuff?
Eric Cullen, ERICCULLEN, private investigator, current.
My name is Glynn Simmons, and I'm a free man.
Perfect.
Glynn Glenn. And I'm Joseph Norwood, Joe. I'm Glenn's lawyer. Proud to have represented him for the last several years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay. We might be able to talk to Glenn, but yeah, I think we can get that done.
Okay, cool, appreciate it.